Hi, I'm Tanya from Time and Space Solutions, and today I'd like to talk to you about trauma, the effects it has emotionally, relationally, and how those two together create clutter in your life. So ask yourself, did you ever notice that you procrastinate and sometimes that to-do list is so long, it's really just a matter of tackling it, but your emotions seem to be getting in the way? Or maybe you have a bunch of unfinished projects in your home because you're holding these resentments towards your partner and the two of you just can't agree, so the clutter keeps on piling up. So let's look at how that happens. First of all, the emotional effects of trauma are things like learned helplessness, so just believing that you can't do something. Or big one is being able to regulate your emotions and actually not being able to, so then they get in the way of you being able to do things. A lot of the time, people don't even realize that, something's bothering them, or they don't even know what their emotions are. You might see their body language and go, "Are you upset?" And they're like, No, I'm fine. Even though their body language and energy is saying that they're upset. And the other part of that emotional literacy, being able to know your emotions, is the emotional intelligence. So once you know it, well, what do you do with it? And so people who've struggled with trauma, which we all have, to some degree or another, struggle with that emotional literacy or emotional intelligence if they haven't actually learned how to do it. Another after effect of trauma on our emotional well-being is shame. Because with trauma, and I've said it before, always comes shame. They go together for protection. And shame keeps us small, which kind of keeps us trapped and doesn't allow us to be in a place where we take action and we move forward because we don't want to be seen. So what does all of that mean? Well, that means that you end up having a lot of things that are not finished because your emotions are getting in the way. Maybe you're reacting and you're hiding and shrinking instead of taking action and moving forward. So when you bring those emotional effects of trauma into a relationship, what does that look like? Well, the relational effects of trauma are things like codependency, not trusting, seeing things as black and white, also just avoiding conflict. There's that fear of conflict and not wanting to deal with things. And another aspect is just low self-esteem. So then you're not standing up for yourself. You're not speaking up for yourself. And then, one person might be dominating, another person might be shrinking even more. And another thing is that a lot of people haven't had a good role model of what a healthy relationship looks like and what it is to have healthy emotions and how to deal with your emotions. So when those emotions come up that kind of pull you down and take you out of alignment, who taught you how to deal with that, right? So if you don't have those things, you bring them into a relationship and that creates clutter. So let's look at now, well, how does clutter show up with the effects of trauma emotionally? So for one, I mentioned earlier, your emotions take over. So then you either freeze, you might avoid things, you might procrastinate, and so the piles continue to get bigger and bigger. Another thing that happens is just difficulty with decision making. So aside from the to-do list, because there's that time clutter, there's the mental clutter, there's the physical clutter. So if you have these emotions that are unresolved and they're trapped in your body and you're just holding on to your stuff because you can't decide, you can't let go, and then you keep on bringing in more and more and more, well, it just becomes overwhelming and impossible to manage. The other side of that is if you're living with a lot of shame, you're unable to reach out for help because then you're embarrassed about your situation. Every client I've ever had has said to me, there's this thing, and they start sharing, and I'm like, that's okay. There's no shame with that. So it's normalizing your experience and understanding that either A, you haven't learned something, or 2, the brain didn't develop, so then you didn't know how, or 3, as I'm talking about now, you were affected emotionally, which then affected you in other areas of your life. Which brings me to the relationship clutter. Well, that shows up big time because if you're not able to deal with your own emotions, the other person can't, and then you can't come to agreement because you do things differently. One person says it's this way, one person says it this way, that, black and white thinking, right and wrong, things don't get done. Okay, that's one aspect of how the clutter is created. Another one is that there's poor conflict resolution, and so then you're actually not coming to an agreement, and then it's just being put aside, put aside, put aside. So similar situation, we can think about that with projects, and we can also think about that with day-to-day life and dishes piling up. Another way to look at it is people pleasing. If you have one person that's doing everything and they're like, they don't want to get into a fight, so they're pleasing the other person, they're taking on way more than they can handle. And then their own personal clutter ends up piling up. These are just a few examples of how clutter shows up emotionally and relationally. So now what? What do? Well, it's about letting go. And one way of letting go is healing the trauma within you energetically. And that's why I love the work that I do, because when you let go of things in your physical space, you have an energetic, emotional attachment to them. So when you let go of that object, in a way, you're letting go of the trauma that lies in your body. There's other great techniques as well, like tapping, EFT tapping, the emotion code. These release traumas out of your body, and they help you get back into center, back into alignment, so that you can reconnect with your soul and spirit and life purpose. I'll put all that information in the link below. The other thing to do is really look at regulating your nervous system and connecting with yourself so that you feel safe. When you feel safe, you don't feel anxious, you don't feel indecisive, you're in your power. So it's really important to do something every day to connect with yourself, whether that's going for a walk, journaling, doing something you love that's creative, anything that helps you reconnect. And then lastly, also integrating things that help strengthen your nervous system, strengthen that ventral vagal window of tolerance, window of capacity, so that you are at your best, you're connected, you're centered, you're grounded, and you can make decisions, and it's easier to let go when you're in that state as opposed to, trying to make these changes and you're just restless and anxious and you're not doing well. So it's better to get grounded first and release within and then release without, and just kind of doing them back and forth, letting go in your physical space, letting go internally, and then together you will release the clutter in your emotions, and you will release the clutter in your relationships, and you will completely transform. So if you want to continue to learn more, subscribe to my YouTube channel or sign up for my newsletter. And you can always reach out to do a free 30-minute clarity call. Check out the links below for the resources and for extra information. Take care.